So just a quick note before we get started. I'm going to have everybody muted just from the onset, just to make sure that there's no background noise while Corey is talking. We are going to have a very substantial question and answer period, so that's the time when people will be unmuted and will be allowed to just start asking questions. But for the meantime, as we introduce Corey and he gets a chance to speak, we're just going to have everybody muted in the back. So if you're not muted already, you should all be. Please go ahead and do so now. I'm just going to keep a tab on admitting people, so I'm sorry if my eyes kind of wander. I'll explain my setup here. I have it done a little bit oddly. For those of you who have just joined us, my name is Ryan Mullins. I'm Corey Mosher's campaign manager. I'm going to be moderating this, introducing Corey here in a moment and taking questions for him. But just to give you a bit of a heads up ahead of time, my computer video camera does not work, but it is where I'm running my audio through and also how I'm hosting this meeting. So I'm using my phone for video. So it's down here, which is why sometimes I'll be looking up. So I apologize if I'm doing that, but that's why it's happening. So now that we have a good number of people in here, and I'm going to try to keep tabs up on this corner to make sure I'm admitting everybody, so sorry if my eyes wander. I'm just going to take a second to go over some basic decorum here. As I mentioned before, we're going to keep everybody muted until we get to the portion where people get to ask questions. So that will be taking place after Corey gets a chance to speak a little bit about some specific agriculture issues and give you guys a bit of a background on what has been going on in his life. I'm going to start out here by introducing Corey. I know a lot of you already know him pretty well. Some of you guys maybe a little bit less so, but still have a general idea of who he is and what he's done, and then still others who have never heard of him. So I'm going to give just a brief resume, a snapshot on what he's been doing and why he's somebody who's worth listening to on this issue. And then I'll hand it over to him to be able to speak. And I just realized I have not spotlighted my video. So if you haven't been seeing me before, this is me. Sorry about that. But I am going to start it off here now that we have a good number of people in here, just by giving you guys a quick background on Corey. So Corey is a fourth generation farmer. A lot of you may know Mosher Farms. That's where he's working. He also serves as a board chairman of the Madison County Cooperative Extension and a board member of the New York State Vegetable Growers Association. He's done a lot of work with the Cornell LEAD program, and he's been in and around working in the barley industry and with vegetable growers throughout New York State. Outside of that, he also was on Rachel May's staff just until very recently, working as an aide to her. So he got a very good chance to be able to interact with Albany and with the Ledge and give them some feedback on some very important agriculture issues. And he'll be able to tell you a number of cases in which he had great dialogue back and forth with Rachel May and was able to talk about these issues and guide her positions. So I don't want to go too much into it because this really is more about the issues than about Corey specifically. So I am going to go ahead and spotlight him now and give him a chance to start talking. He'll take about 15, 20 minutes and talk about some issues that he thinks are very relevant right now. And then I'll take a second to give him one or two brief questions just to get the ball rolling, and we'll start it back and forth. We really want this to be a conversation and let you guys get your ideas, questions out there. I know a lot of you guys are going to have some more experience in this industry and be able to provide some very detailed information, and still others, this might all be new to you. So no questions are unwelcome. Nothing is off the table. Please feel free to ask about ag, about the campaign, about anything. We are trying to keep this specific town hall agriculture focused. But other than that, we would love to hear anything. So without further ado, then I am going to hand it off to Corey. Go ahead and spotlight his video and let him start talking.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. And let me give you a little bit of context right now. You know, we're the 30th, and this time of year, farms are just beginning that really short window that we have in this area to get our crops in. And I contextualize this a little bit because it's pretty fitting we have a rainstorm coming through, and I'm sitting in our storage barn, and this is the location that after a long days out in the field, the equipment would be coming in, we'd all be ducking in here as the rain started to fall, and we'd all kind of just take a breather and get into some conversations about how the day went, or any conversations or anything we read or heard on the radio conversations. But they're always one of my favorite parts, right? And we always kind of walk away from those conversations. Well, we just solved the world's problems, and I don't imagine that we're going to do that tonight. But I'm really happy to have everybody join me in that conversation. So it's really fitting that I'm in this spot having that conversation with you tonight. And it really starts, what the conversations we're having right now really focus on COVID-19 and more specifically, really how it's affecting everybody and how it's affecting agriculture. So we're going to talk about that tonight, talk about what I've been working on, some things that I see in my networks and the people that I'm talking to. And, we got to start off really by thanking our healthcare workers. If you are a part of the healthcare front line, I want to extend my gratitude to you. We on this farm we have an employee who has his wife is a nurse here in Hamilton, and I'm not going to betray any names or anything like that, but this hits really, really close to home. And I know the sacrifices that they have had to make as a family in going through this. And we really can never forget and get complacent about the work that you guys are doing. So my heartfelt thanks go to that, and I want to recognize that first. And then second, we'll talk a lot about essential work tonight. As farmers, we are essential workers, so we're out there doing our best to keep things going, and I'll contextualize that a little bit later. But a thank you to all the essential workers out there that are keeping the world going as we navigate this. And it's a lot of frustration, a lot of anger, a lot of worry. But I'm really uplifted by the people that I see, the relationships actually that I've been able to build and make as we are all in this together. And I'm really, there are silver linings to this that you have to focus in on, or you'll get dragged down into those despair. So I do want to talk though tonight about how I view this and where I think that we can go and where we can be doing a better job. Leadership has been all over the place, and good and bad as we go through this crisis. But for me, where some of this really hits home and kind of has me wondering and thinking out loud is when it comes to essential workers and the plight of our farmers and where we are in the agricultural industry. I'm really proud of this region. I think we can say the public has stepped up, and a big reason why numbers have gone. I know recently in our region, numbers have started to tick back up. But I think it really is a credit to the public for heeding warnings and reacting the way they do. But we need to do right by our workers. And I feel very strongly as we go forward, our leadership needs to have faith in what the public is doing, and they need to help support that. The healthcare industry is number one and number two as far as priority with personal protective equipment. But I'm talking to a lot of industry people in agriculture, both on the farm and our support industries, that are really, really worried about what might happen if we have upticks in this virus on the farm, and what that means going forward, particularly in the situation that we're right now, the season that we're going into. We'll talk about the supply chain tonight, and we'll talk about issues, short-term issues and long-term issues that is associated with that. But the more that we can help support the essential workers and the farmers, I think the better we're going to position ourselves to come out of this. And that's really what I want to highlight tonight. I want to answer your questions. So first and foremost, let me get into conversations that I'm having. On the bright side, there are people stepping up all over the place to deal with the problems in supply chain that we've been seeing. It's should be no surprise. Well, I'm sorry, let me change that. It's been highlighted a lot in our area, the problem with the dairy supply. And I think that is a good place to start. So when you have restaurants and different institutions that are not making bulk purchases anymore, you run into these issues, and it's not just dairy, but it's more prevalent in this area with dairy, where all of a sudden that 2-pound block of cheese that was supposed to be distributed and packaged in a certain way to go and feed those mouths is no longer can be divvied up and processed in a way to accommodate the shortages that we're having in our grocery stores. Our supply chains have become very efficient, but in that, the flexibility of that and what we've seen happen in just an unprecedented time frame, it's hard for those systems to adjust. I do believe in a lot of ways, we've seen some short-term issues that the supply chain will rectify as we get into maybe different ways to package that product. I have heard a lot of bulk buying, right? Some people that have reached out to Cisco as Cisco's numbers have really dropped in their deliveries for restaurants and institutions. Families have gotten together to make bulk purchases from places like that. So they are getting those in quantity, and then they're going through and divvying that up amongst them. So there's really outside the box thinking along as those terms. So the other thing we've been working on, though, is with everybody out of work now we're feeding, we really need to come up with ways to help address the problems at food banks and the need that's out there. What a wonderful thing that communities have stepped up, really here close to where we are right now. Morrisville has stopped up, really just done a wonderful job with their milk drives. They're going to have their 4th one tomorrow. Sean Bassard called me and let me know what was going on and asked if we could use our refrigerated truck. I was happy to, whatever we could do. And then, we went into, okay, so they did one, and then the turnout just blew everybody away. And then they had another one, and then tomorrow is going to be their 4th. And it should be pretty sobering, the need that's out there, and the people that I've run into. I actually had a very nice lady, ask, hey, I saw your truck. Are you guys participating in that? And the credit goes to them because we're just, we're offering up our truck. But she just was so thankful that that's a resource and that was available. She just, my kids go through a lot of milk. So we're working on ways to help that supply chain to those food banks. I was reached out by some individuals to network with the systems that I know in the food chain. So traditionally in our area, we do have wholesale products going down to the city, whether New York City, Philadelphia. So there is distribution there and there's capacity for packing. So we're linking those people up to link up with those procurement people that can bring product in that then can now work with the federal government's food box program to get those boxes packaged and then over to our food banks. And I'm really proud of the work that's going into that. It's amazing the speed of which this is happening. The RFP for that came out last Friday. So it's a bidding process. So we understand more about what that's going to look like. And then those applications for that are going out and due, I think tomorrow. And then we'll get results on that. And we're going to start, moving product to those food banks. I'm really happy you're joining with me tonight. I do want this to be a conversation. Like I said, I appreciate this introduction that Ryan has given me. Let me offer some of the things that we're working on. But I really encourage you to engage in this conversation, and let's talk about the things that we're going through, whether it be a statement, something good that you've seen, something troubling you've seen. There's something that I learned in Lee, New York that has stuck with me, probably above everything else. And it's that farmers have always been told, or it's been beat into us to tell your story, tell your story, tell your story. That's not enough. Farmers, we need to engage in that conversation. And I believe that not just about agriculture these days. I really strongly feel that participating in the conversation and being open-minded about backgrounds and where people are coming from and what people have to bring to the table is how you really get things done. And that's what I'm about. That's what this campaign is about. And I know that's what's going to lead to us being in a better position down the road. So I'll pass it back to you, Ryan, and let's get ready for some questions.
Great. Yeah, thank you very much, Corey. So I don't want to take up too much space here. I know we talk back and forth all the time, so I can get some personal questions answered from you very easily. But let me just talk real quick about how I want this to work here, just so we can get this as efficient as possible. If you could raise your hand, that'd be great. Also, if you can ask a question in chat, that's probably a little better because there are so many people that it doesn't actually fit on one screen. I might miss you if you're just raising your hand. So I'd love it if you could ask a question in chat. But first, I just want to ask one of you to get things rolling. I wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about how life on the farm has changed. So if you could go a little bit into what a day looked like, a typical day would have looked like for you before, and how it might be different now, just to give us a sense of how this has impacted you guys on a daily basis.
Thanks, Ryan. So obviously time of year kind of enters into that, but so we're really gearing up for the season and have been for the past few months, working on equipment and getting ready. And with COVID, it like everybody else, we're trying to be as cautious as possible. One thing I was worried about early on is jumping in and out of cabs. So we have several cabs. I don't even know how many different tractors and different areas that we can hop in. And if you have somebody that has been affected, obviously somebody jumping in the cab right after that is not the best practices. So we've really tried to institute some things around our farm. But it's very, very difficult. As we speed up and we're putting in more and more hours in the day, as we try to get crops in the ground, you see this, this urgency, and it really does worry me that we don't have the proper protective equipment to protect us. I also know there's more and more cross-pollination, if you will, as our different ag services are getting out there and working on the farm. And then farmers, we're not just isolated completely on our farms. We do work with networks. And as the weather gets warmer, obviously we're practicing good guidelines like everybody else is. But it's interesting. I've had some conversations with people that think we're just out in the field. We don't have to worry about it. I can guarantee you that's not always the case. And it's been well publicized what's going on with meat processing, and our different dairy processors have some really challenging things that they have to deal with right now as they try to institute things to keep them protected. I want to make sure that I'm voicing support for everything that they're trying to do to keep their workers safe, but they need to be given the proper materials to do such.
Great, thank you, Corey. We do have one question from Liz Moran. So she asks, how can this current crisis affect spring planting, and do we have enough workers?
So right now, I would say, Liz, that is the number one concern long term that people have. I've talked with farmers specifically that say if they can't get the labor to harvest those crops, that they cannot afford to put forth the cost to put that in the ground. Right now, it sounds like things have progressed in a safe manner and that people are getting the labor that they need. I'm very worried because our workers are not here yet. We have 4 migrant workers that are from Guatemala. They have their green cards, so right now, legally, they're still able to come. They're not issuing new green cards, but our guys have been working with us for years and years and years. So we're hopeful that we won't run into snags, but we are very, very worried about that because if we're not able to get the labor in order to get our crops off, it'll be devastating and lead to really long-term issues. We do hire a lot of local labor as well. Our local labor is dealing with this. The people that we really depend on, I know of a daughter that's a nurse that was affected by this. So turning out those workers to harvest the crops, I think is something, that keeps me up at night. And Liz, I really appreciate you addressing that because it's something that we need to be concerned of, and we need to help support that so we have long-term food stability.
Great. I have another question from Sue Reimers here. This is about supplies for you guys. So in terms of seeds, fertilizers, and everything else, is it problematic for you guys to be getting that right now? Are you having any difficulties with the supply chain?
We have had a little bit in delays, and we've been told by our main seed suppliers and the other people that we work with that just try to be ahead of it, right? So whereas we might be ordering things a week out, give that buffer zone. And thankfully, we haven't run into major issues yet. Supplies are still getting to us where we need, but thank you for bringing that up, Sue. It's something to keep an eye out for. It's one of the first questions that I had. Our seed suppliers say, okay, what are we in for? And luckily, or I shouldn't say luckily, hopefully that continues the way it is. But I do want to add to that. I think the big worry with that, right, if you have all of a sudden an ag support industry that has to shut down, that gets affected by this, and it's really proliferated through what they're doing, it will have repercussions throughout the growing season. I could rattle off several, whether it be a Growmark or a Caravel or our seed suppliers at Seedway or Pioneer, any of those avenues of our supply chain were to get to shut down. That's not our farm that's just going to be affected. It's going to affect everybody as they try to get crops in the ground. So it's a big worry right now.
Great, thanks. And just a quick note before I ask the next question. If you guys send me messages, me being Ryan Mullins, that's going to my phone. So I have to click on the chat there so my video gets disrupted. If you guys could send it to friends of Corey Mosher, that'd be great. But we do have another question from Chris and John about local access points for food. So how is this affecting access for like farmers markets and farm stands? And how do you see that going forward?
They're going to do their best with trying to accommodate and try to bring something, right? So still giving farmers that really depend on those avenues, those access points. They are going, I've seen certain farmers markets limit exactly what is going to be offered, and I'm sure you'll see a lot of, heating warnings, making sure people are separate. But in the Northeast, we're just coming into that season where that stuff is going to be opening up in terms of farms markets and some of the outlets that we have for our produce. It's very, very crop specific on what got affected with the supply chains, right? Talking to people that I work with packing and distribution with, there are really some worries there in what they do with some wholesales, but on other things they've seen demand raise 250% in such a short amount of time frame. So it really is crop specific in what those avenues. And I'll be honest with you, my conversations with whether it be the Fruit and Vegetable Association or people throughout the state in agriculture, we know we're going to be different coming out of this than going in, obviously, in a lot of ways, not just agriculture, but specifically to agriculture and how we access food. With this learning curve that's coming with, I think, a lot of people that maybe we're not cooking in a lot, and maybe, will that trend stay? So will we see a really change in the supply chain? And there might be some of that is intriguing as we try to figure out the best way to get our products to market. And I think a lot of work needs to be done to understand what changes are going on. And I think it's really going to affect those people negatively in a lot of ways, but there will be some positives. And we need to help farmers understand those changes and help diversify to make sure that they can participate in those different avenues. And at this point, I want to say there's a lot of worry, right? And how can we help farmers, Corey, right? What can we do, and what big changes will affect it? And the big thing is to make sure that you're giving farmers the chance and have that microphone, because they know their supply chains. They know what's going on. I've talked to dairy farmers that can tell you specifically what each one of their processors is doing and how they're trying to adjust what they're doing to help alleviate some of the issues that they're having. Those farmers know that, and they need to be given the chance to convey that to people and also to work to help move into different avenues of the supply chain.
Great. Thank you, Corey. I have a question from Christy Anderson. Sorry, my video is going to go for a second while I read it off. But she asks about the meat processing plants. It sounds like it's really difficult to set those plants up using social distancing. And the business owners have actually been pushing regulators to allow them to speed up their production lines recently. Now the president wants all these places to reopen. What are your thoughts about all this?
I'm really worried that, the executive order, right, to make sure that these plants continue to stay open, and reading about it, it really is about the liability, right, concerns that these meat processors have. Man, you've got to think about those workers, right? And that's why I know it's really tough right now with where we're at with protective equipment. But if we're going to deem these workers essential, and we're going to ask them to really put themselves at risk, we have to be able to give them the equipment. And I think faith needs to be put in the American industry to help galvanize that, to produce the equipment that we need so that can stay open. I don't think those workers are getting the support that they need in order to be safe and continue to function.
So we have another question from Dorian Corbin, who asks, what about hop farmers who are trying to sell hops right now?
Whoa, talk about a curveball there. I love it. So our farm is a very diverse farm. And as I've participated in LEAD and understood more of supply chains, it's really important for farmers to have avenues that they can help diversify in. And that's, when you say diversity in agriculture, a lot of times that means, okay, so instead of growing green beans, you grow onions. That's not the limit to what diversity can mean. Yeah, it means different crops, but it also means diversifying in your supply chain, right? So we can direct market to people and find those avenues. We can wholesale to different people that then direct market, or we can wholesale to retailers, and then we can also get into processing vegetables. So we have contract with larger food processors that then either canned product or packaged product. So there's lots of different avenues that farmers can use to help diversify. So you asked specifically about hops. New York State did, I think, a really great job in opening up a new market and new avenues, not just to help agriculture, but to help the brewery industry, right? As we had this huge growth in microbrews, and to go from, even in my lifetime, I just very, very small numbers of large brewers to what we see today is really astounding. And it really has opened up opportunities on a very, very local level, as these breweries have been allowed to open. And in doing that, it was a great idea to link that to agriculture. Say, okay, if you want to open up a brewery, we're going to help you, and we're going to give you a farm license so you can direct sell to the public. But we're going to ask you that you purchase product from New York State to do so. And in concept, what a wonderful idea. And it led to a lot of growth, right? A lot of breweries went in, a lot of hop farms went in. We're also malting barley growers, so that has helped us diversify. We can't take our eye off the ball, though. We're talking years and years, if not decades, to help grow an industry back from what it was to what it could be. So I would comment with hops right now. It is a roller coaster ride. There are avenues that people have had a lot of success with, but there is some really struggles to make sure that all our product gets to market. So I'm hopeful that it gets the attention it needs, but it's funny because as the winds have kind of changed and gotten into some other products, the focus tends to go away. And as farmers, we cannot follow trends, right? Our whatever is in vogue at that moment, and what our legislators are talking about, or what the public wants, those trends cannot last, those trends don't help out farmers who really need long-term thinking. And hops, it takes 3 years to get a hop yard in production. So those are the troubles that are the things that we need to think about as we help to support agriculture, and we talk about helping farms diversify, and making sure that the money is there for education and research to help that stuff be successful.
Great, and I know there's a lot you want to talk about with hops. So we can do some more if other people are more interested in getting more in depth there. But I have another question from Laura. The milk giveaways are a great thing to see on so many levels, knowing that the milk isn't being dumped and people in need are being helped. But how does it help our dairy farmers financially? Can we help with donations, and what can we do?
So what can you do? Learn as much as you can, right, about what's going on and what dairy farmers are going through right now. And it did not start with COVID-19. Dairy farmers were struggling as markets were depressed, and now to hit this on top of everything is truly devastating. So having that knowledge and understanding what those farmers are going through, participate and get to know all the excellent ag groups and what they have to offer, whether it be Farm Bureau, who helps support agriculture, Cornell Cooperative Extension, which runs so many different great programs for outreach. By supporting those programs, you can in turn help support farmers. So I would draw your attention to that first. But specifically with dairy, talk to people about the importance of and how the nutrition of milk goes a long way. As I'm always just amazed, and I'm so happy that the people that I know in dairy are very quick to educate people on the nutrition that is in milk, and help right a lot of wrongs that sometimes get written about what what they respond to. It really is sad sometimes, some of the conversations that you end up having to have, right? And the demonizing of certain things. So talking about that and having your facts straight, right? Science matters in this, and help having that conversation. And I think sometimes a lot of people forget that. I know this sounds crazy, but they don't understand where yogurt and cheese and butter come from, right? They disassociate that. And it's such a vital, not only for nutrition and what is available to our kids, but for us in this district, right? Dairy is so critical to our economy, and the different, not just the dairy farmers, but the different related businesses and the income that comes in, that cannot be undervalued.
Great. So I have a question from Chris Henke. So many of our food/farm programs are funded at the federal level, and I'm concerned that important food/farm programs are being used as a political football. Are there ways for us to influence or take better control of those programs to support New York consumers and farmers?
Well, it starts with more of an ag voice. I'll tell you that, Chris. So I really appreciate the work that's being done throughout the state, but it really does start with a vacuum that is there. I saw somebody wrote in the question, "Hey Corey, why are you running?" And it centers in on that very thing. In a lot of ways, ag is not at the table in a lot of these discussions and these supports. Just having conversations today, listen, we're in really tough times as far as the budget goes in the state, but when you put that in context of the amount or the lack thereof of the investment in agriculture, just in a very short time span, in the last 10 years, I think it was 35% of dollars to help support agriculture in New York State of what it once was. So each individual farm, if you took every individual farm, what the investment is from government to help support that industry is 35% less today than it was at the latest ag census. We're doing a disservice, and the lack of voice in Albany right now for our farmers. That's why I'm doing this. It's the people that I care about, and it's so stark to see that. And I know there's a lot of people that want to do good, but I don't think they understand what it is to be a farmer.
Great. So I have a question from Judith Nicholson. She asks, are you aware of Governor Cuomo's initiatives to address issues impacting the farmers? I'll tag on to that. What do you think about the initiatives? And if you could talk a little bit about what's going on here at the state level.
Yeah, I was really pleased that, this stuff is happening fast. We were talking Friday about the federal program to get boxes to food banks. And then that day we were on the conference call talking about that federal program. And then I heard the state program to do the same thing, and specifically for dairy. So I think that's wonderful. I saw the partners that are involved, and I think there are a lot of people coming to the table to help move that initiative forward, so that we're the hard-earned work that farmers are doing to have their dairy products. I can tell you this: farmers like myself and dairy farmers, when we have to get rid of product by dumping it in wasteful, there's a little bit of a piece of us that it hits us hard. So on top of everything else, right? The waste that goes in, the financial instability that it creates, you also have that happening. So I think the governor's attention on that is really good. That program needs to ramp up fast to get these type of support for dairy farmers. So I do appreciate his efforts in that.
I have another question from Sue. She asks, could you talk a little bit more about crop rotation, such as with barley?
Mm-hmm. So agronomy, I love it. So our crop rotation that I'm very, very a student and want to learn as much as I can, and always have been, about what other farms are doing and how they're helping sustain their farms for generations to come. So I'm fourth generation, and it's not lost on me any single day about what the people that came ahead of me, what they were able to provide, so that maybe one day, if they're up for it, my kids and my grandkids, And that really is about how you're working the soil and what you're able to produce and do to help make sure that soil is either the same, if not better, than you left it. And crop rotation is so vital to that. I don't know, I don't want to bore everybody and get really into specifics on it, but I will segue a little bit and talk about climate change in this sense, and what farmers are doing, to really help mitigate their environmental impact. And a lot of that is with crop rotation. The prevalence of no-till in farm systems now is really amazing compared to even where it was 20 years ago. So that reduced tillage is helping in a lot of different ways. One, it's less passes through the field, so farmers are spending less on fuel. So it's a win-win because it's better, we're not using as fuel, and the farmers are actually saving a lot of money in doing so. And we've come up with systems now that can better handle that. And I really want that to be highlighted about the great work that farmers are doing. Cover cropping has become a lot more prevalent. More specifically, I'll get into the weeds a little bit, no pun intended. Right now, we're out there looking at our barley and our wheat. We're going to be putting in interseeding that with clover so that when we take that off in July, that clover is then able to grow throughout the fall and then put nitrogen back in the soil so that we can come later and plow that under the following year, and then put corn in it. And our best corn is always following our clover crop. So it are things like that that farmers are into and looking at, and that education, when I talk about that education piece and the outreach that so many great ag organizations are doing to get the word out. I just participated in a job interview for the regional team. The Central New York regional team is looking for their new grain person. We're losing Kevin Gano, and we're sad to see him go because he's been such a resource for farms throughout Central New York when it comes to this and grain, and whether it be corn or soybeans or the small grains like we have on our farm. So in that we're having those discussions in that interview, and to see that education piece that is then going to be available for farmers. They're really great people and optimistic people that are always looking for that next things to help both save farmers money, but also to help mitigate their impact on the environment. And it's a very exciting time. I know a lot has been made about the political side of climate change, but I see a lot of great things that are happening that farmers are on board with and to help farmers out.
I know you talked a little bit about this earlier when you got into it in the middle of one of the other questions, but could you talk a little bit more about what motivated you to run? This question is from Eli Goldstein.
Thanks. So this started to build as I was on the farm for about 10 years. And I knew that I was learning, but I'm a lifelong learner, and I knew I needed to kind of expand my horizons. And so I joined a program out of Cornell called Lead New York, and it couples both getting you off the farm, right? So it's an ag group. They usually have about half producers like myself and then half ag associated businesses. So your Farm Credit East, your or be DFA or extension, and it really plucks you off your farm and really shows you the breadth and the fascinating things that are throughout agriculture. And I know everybody kind of thinks farms, but also forestry, and seafood and all the different avenues that you take. So throughout that program, a couple of different things happened. I found myself getting more and more of a voice, and wanting to have larger impact on that community, whether it be in agriculture, but also, you know, not not external, but also internal. The way we treat our employees. Like I said, we have migrant workers on our farm, and getting to know them and talking about things that they did in their past and why they were here and what they were doing. I really started to find a voice and a need to um, to be that voice that they couldn't, right? Whether it be language barriers or just not really given the chance to talk about what they're doing and why. I really wanted to be an advocate on their behalf, and that grew. And then I found I had a larger aptitude for this type of work. I've always been somebody, like I said, that you know, wants to communicate and bring different backgrounds to the table and understanding. And when I looked at what was going on in agriculture and going on in Albany, I could see plain as day that conversation, that understanding, and that empathy is really something that is lacking. And I thought that I could bring something to the table, and I feel very passionate that I can bring something to the table using those networks. And that is why I think, right, this isn't just about running and being a good candidate. It's about being a good representative and leading and bringing resources to this area, but also being an advocate for this area and being an ambassador for this area, because we have so much to offer and so much is made out to be a negative in what we do, and people don't understand the communities that we come from. I really, really want to be that person that can help advocate for not just agriculture, but our district, and really showcase the great things that, why you and I love being here. So.
Awesome. I have a question from Alan. He asks, are local farmers exploring the possibility of forming more cooperatives to have some control of processing, storage, and delivery? Sorry, I just lost the question as another one came up. Storage and delivery of their products and become less dependent on big agribusiness corporations.
Yes, that's a great question. You know, in this district, you don't have to go back very far where there was a pea cannery in every single town, right? As we had to produce the food in this area that, you know, then we consumed throughout the winter. So the food system was just completely different. And you're exactly right about farmers working together to help aggregate their products in order to have opportunities to move forward. So co-ops, you're exactly right. And it's interesting when you talk about co-ops, though, because as co-ops grow and mature, they almost turn into that entity that you talked about. Okay, but we don't have to be dependable on that. So that farmer engagement and empowering farms. I've always been impressed with those organizations associated ag that man, and they're prevalent all over. Those ag organizations that are still farmer driven. I think is really, really key to bring that perspective about what farmers are doing. But you're exactly right to focus in on that. We do have a lack of processing in the state. As you see, pick a crop, cabbage, right, used to be really prevalent in this area. And that processing for sauerkraut that really has big markets in the Northeast has really left this state. So could farmers get together and have co-ops and work more to bring some of that back to the state? Yes, definitely. But they can't do it when they feel like they're always chasing their tail. And I really do feel like farmers feel under siege, whether it be labor or the cost of doing business in these markets. So there's a lot that we can do to help alleviate that. So then farmers do see those opportunities and take advantage of those opportunities and work together.
From Liz, I have a question. Have there been any discussions about whether you can hold or create alternatives to the traditional open farm day?
Ooh. So I'm really proud of that program. Farm was one of the, very early days to be part of Open Farm Day, and to see where it has come is fantastic. That's great. I didn't see that one coming, Liz. The next step, I think, for Open Farm Day, to utilize the best that it's doing, is to bring more of the outside in with that. I mean, it's really, the participation is just amazing, and what you get, in the county. And I there's a lot of people that schedule that date out a year in advance to make sure that they're out there on farms, and having access to people and having those conversations. We need to bring more of that, and I think Madison County can really broaden that. There are plans to do so, to make sure that people understand that. And I think we're really proud of the fact, and I'm talking to Corinne or the folks over at Cooperative Extension, really proud of the fact that that's now being emulated in different parts of the state, what they were able to do with Open Farm Day. But that work, Liz, is extremely important, and needs to be more supported as we talk about having that conversation with farms. So again, people's concerns are met. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, when it comes to questioning, right, about animal welfare or pesticide use or any of the different hot button things that can get people so animated in chat rooms, you can't just block that stuff out. You have to have that conversation. And Open Farm Day and having that contact and those conversations with those farm, it really is the path forward to making sure that there's understanding there, as fewer and fewer people are in farming, that we have those avenues to talk to the public.
From Eric Vandervoort, can you talk a little bit about rural poverty? We know there are farm families and neighbors who lack many resources. How can we serve those people better when they are so removed from traditional service delivery?
So Eric, part of what why I'm running is to highlight the issues that are faced with our communities, as you know very well. There's a lot made in Albany about things that are happening in New York City, or problems that need to happen in New York City, and that your colleagues are very, very passionate about. But something you and Senator May have been very good at is highlighting, wait, those aren't problems that you guys have that are just city alone, that we have rural poverty that needs to be addressed. And I think continuing to have that conversation and bringing people to the district is really, really vital, because we cannot do this alone. But I also am going to circle back around and say that pride in this area and what we do, and understanding the economics of this area are really, really vital. And what I get really frustrated with by some people that, they're from upstate, and they're on the outside looking in, and they seem to kind of think that just complaining about it is going to get something done, instead of building those networks and those relationships to help bring resources to help alleviate the problems that we have in the district.
Great. I have no more questions right now, but I have one for you personally. I actually talked with you a little bit about this the other day, so for someone like me who lives outside of the agriculture world, I've primarily grown up in suburban areas and that kind of thing. I haven't really been as connected with farms and farmers before, but specifically because of this incident, I've ordered from, so I live in Syracuse, for those of you who don't know. So we have Eden CNY and Off the Muck, who deliver fresh farm veggies and meat. And it's fantastic. And it's something that I've never tapped into before, outside of going to farmers markets. And I'm feeling, this kind of renewed interest in this, and this fascination with these fresh to my house delivered foods. So I'm wondering, in the conversations you're having with people outside of this industry, whether that be legislators or just lay people. Do you think the general attitude towards agriculture is shifting, especially as it relates to this crisis? Because for me, where I wouldn't have normally seen these connections, I'm now becoming a lot more invested.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Ryan. And that's why it's so, there's a lot being made, and there's a lot that can get you down with what's going on these days, in and out of agriculture. But I am still very, very optimistic about the direction that we're headed. And you just highlighted one of the areas that we need to be optimistic about and see the silver lining in all of this. We need to adapt as farmers, and we need to offer up opportunities for those farmers to adapt. And the way we're going to do that is through education and research and those great programs that you just talked about that are just starting off, right? They're filling a need. There's a vacuum and a problem that exists, and their ingenuity in trying to offer up solutions to those problems are what makes us great, that we come up with solutions to problems that we have. And I do think farmers are going to be right there to help us go forward in how this world looks like after, and how different it is from where we were before. And I do think there are going to be very, very unique opportunities for farmers to address that, what you're talking about, Ryan. You talk about yourself being a suburban kid. I was, I come from that world a little bit. My father was in the military, right? So I moved around the country as a kid and kind of grew up with that. And when I was coming back to the farm, I understand that viewpoint, right? And I understand what that means and some of those preconceived notions that aren't always negative, but what I understood about what farming and agriculture was. And what a great opportunity that is that you faced, and I think is replicated over so many different people as, they haven't been able to have that food access like they had before, and now they're adapting and finding new ways, and they're better for it. And I think agriculture can, as long as we're educating and helping those farmers understand different ways to have those access points, then they'll benefit from that. And that's what I want to see.
I have a clarification from Liz about her earlier question about Open Farm Day. She asks, in the context of COVID-19, is Open Farm Day possible?
Yeah, I think so, Liz. I do. We'll have to see when the time comes where we're at with all this. But I'll follow up with you, because that's a conversation that I'm sure they're having over there. I'd be happy to reach back out to you personally and find out where that conversation is. But farmers are going to have to adapt, right? Some of those farms that are involved in Open Farm Day, like ours, are already retail oriented, dealing with public, and it's going to change with how we access, people have access to their food, because food safety is number one. We can't do what we do if we're not completely safe. So you're going to see different ways that farmers are going to have to do business throughout this, but it's still very important that we grow food that people are able to eat. So we have to adapt. But you're exactly right. I understand that concern, and I'll follow up with you to see the steps that are being taken, because it is such an important event. I'm sorry I misunderstood that.
I have a question from Michaela Kanu. Sorry if I've mispronounced that. What do you want to change or improve for local and migrant farm workers?
So with a lot of different ways I could go with that one. When I sat down, I mentioned earlier the conversations that I had with Adon. I don't think people realize. I think they look at what's going on and they think that our migrant laborers are exploited by the farmers. And what I want people to realize, and what I realized, was that in having those conversations, Alfonso and Adon were telling me, Corey, I come from northern Guatemala. I pick strawberries and I make about, I think at the time he was saying $5 a day. And then he learned about opportunities available to do that same job that he was doing on farms in the United States, and just make so much more than that, that then he can have opportunities for his family and maybe buy some land of his own one day. And isn't that the American dream? I thought, and I still feel very passionate about that at that time, that here's a group of people that is so demonized for, for what they do and why they're here. Their story just is not, is that the embodiment of the American dream and what they're trying to do to seek out economic opportunity. That first and foremost, that narrative I want to speak to, because I think people identify that and can understand that pursuit of happiness that they're, it's a lofty goal, right? Like to talk about that narrative and want to change people's perceptions, but you have to speak truth to it. And that's where it starts. And throughout New York State too, I think there's a lot of frustration on what is happening with immigration and migrants at the federal level. Right? I think there are people very, very upset. Obviously, I think we just look at that and wonder, how can we be treating that segment of the population like that? And I think in New York State, there was a motivation to do something. I went to some farm workers' rights meetings previous. I was in lead at the time, and I was having these conversations about immigration for people that felt very strongly about it on either side. And I wanted to understand more about what was going on. And I heard, okay, these people are working on migrant rights. That's wonderful. This is something that I want to speak to. And I went to that meeting, and I came out of it completely stunned, because the people that wanted to make change for migrant workers, they were really focusing in on the bad guys being farms. And that is a narrative that at that time I just was not prepared for, because the farmers that I know that could be their biggest advocates and want to be. I could rattle off name after name after name of people that have really grown up in their farms and are working long time with owners and in line to be part of upper management themselves. And that's the narrative that I know. That's the understanding that I know in the relationship that we have with our workers. So I want to be that at the state level too, and explain that relationship to hopefully create some avenues of understanding within agriculture and what we need to do as farms and help protect workers' rights all at the same time.
Corey, we've just lost your video feed. I don't know if there's. Yeah. Okay. I have a question that I missed earlier. I apologize. It went to my chat here on my phone, so again, my video is going to be disrupted as I read it. But this is from Peter Radasta, and he asks, inasmuch as you expressed the absence of agriculture issues on the forefront in the assembly, he asks me to ask you to share your thoughts on whether any of former Assemblyman McGee's efforts and influences in ag can be reinstated and bolstered.
Oh my gosh, yes. Just in the fact that he was so ag-centric, right? It grounded him in a way that I think, man, what a great template he laid forth for how to speak, and be a Democrat, and speak truth to what he saw in agriculture and help advocate. So, very much so. I think there's a lot that Bill McGee offered that has been lost in Albany, and that I think has not been gone. That we couldn't rectify that and bring that back. His focus in on ag. When I would go to Albany and have conversations with different representatives, and we would get to Bill McGee's office, and you would go in and you'd think, okay, this one's going to be an easy one. It's Bill McGee. He knows this stuff. You walk in and he's got the candy jar sitting on the table that moves when you reach and grab a piece of candy. And then you sat there and you were waiting to just, walk out of there and be happy because ag was going to be such a big, or Bill was going to be such a big ag advocate. And then Bill wouldn't offer up a whole lot. he wanted you to talk to him about it, and what a great listener he was to talk about the issues, and always came through, was always the biggest advocate for agriculture. And that yes, that's not very far away. That can be there. It really can be there, but they're missing Bill's voice these days.
I apologize, I was muted. I don't have any other questions coming in right now, but I will say real quick here that we had this scheduled until 9, so are happy to continue the conversation here. But I have one question for you right now, Corey, and it is actually sort of related to this question you just answered. But basically, in your view, what is currently missing from agriculture policy in the state ledge? And what can be done from both a community perspective and from a legislation perspective to try to get this community more represented?
So, where do I want to start? The investment in agriculture needs to be really focused in on, and again, the avenues for which there's outreach to agriculture and education and research, there is so much to be motivated about, and that needs support. And I understand the budget cuts that we are under, but again, I'll reiterate the long erosion of that investment in agriculture, because I really do feel, and I think we're seeing it with the response that we're trying to have with COVID, that, to be deemed essential, like we're always essential. It just has a title these days. So I think that investment and that money is very, very well spent. And there's several different avenues that I could go to talk about what that investment needs to be. So Ryan, can you repeat some of that question to me back, please?
Yeah, of course. So I know it's a little bit broad, but I just wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about what's currently missing from ag legislation, both just from policy in general and from the general perspective in the legislature, and what can be done from the community and also from the legislature's perspectives.
So the lack of ag voice has led to some troubling things that have happened over the course, and I think that lack of ag voice kind of led to these things happening. And I'll give you something that's really personal. I'm the nephew on my farm, and in the labor law that passed, and there's some really good people that are working hard to make adjustments to that. But I would no longer be considered, part of the family unit, right? So I wouldn't be exempt or whatever that means. I would have to be in for overtime. It's scary to think, after all this time that I've spent on the farm, as my, uncle hasn't had anybody that, filled in that position that I did, of what situation not only me personally would be in, would those opportunities been afforded to me, but what situation this farm would be in. So those are the type of things that I think are so critical that I can bring to the table and talk about, because again, families are multi-generational, and their aunts and uncles and cousins. That's a very specific answer to that question, but I think it highlights the importance of what can be done and needs to be done, and that voice that needs to be done in Albany. So.
Great. Well, I don't have any other questions right now. Actually, I just got one in right as I said that. From Ellen. She asks, the people of Central New York are passionate about our region. How do you think you will bring our voices to Albany? How will you help us?
So, being a fourth generation in this area, understanding this area, what this area has to offer, the great education opportunities that are here, the 5 higher learning colleges and universities that we have, highlighting the importance of that and the importance that we are to our downstate cousins. I think a lot of times it's viewed that that's a one-way street, that money that's generated and then flows into our counties and our towns. That's not just a one-way street. There's so much that we have to offer as a resource and what we do that I don't think is highlighted. So I would bring focus into that, understanding this community. And I really love that question because it is a passion of mine. When you have a farm stand like we do, and you talk with people and come by and you get that conversation that you have, oh, I've been coming to your place as a kid, or, oh, my mother or grandmother used to bring me there and I'm still coming there today. You build this relationship with the community and understanding with the community that, that you can't replace that. And I think I've really understood well about, I apologize. Of what that means and what we're about, and that needs to be communicated. I get really frustrated with some of the narrative and the talk about how the narrative that you kind of wonder if they really believe in where they come from, and the people that we have and the passion that's up here. And I just refuse to believe that's the truth.
I have two very similar questions here. So the people want to know what they can do to help get you elected.
Thank you so much. So Mosher40NewYork.com, please engage us. Keep these conversations going. I'll be honest with you, it's very, very hard to run a campaign under these circumstances. I would love to be seeing your faces and really engaging with you one-on-one. So anything you can do to help us get in front of people and communicate what I'm about, what I'm doing, and then in turn get us in front of those people. Thank you for posting that. So that's a start. I really appreciate that question. And just keep engaging of us. You're going to see more and more of a presence. I'm really happy to admit or announce that we're going to have more digital experiences coming forth. Our first YouTube videos coming out that I'm very excited about, that we're going to keep in contact with everybody and highlight kind of more specifically what I'm about in the platform that we have, whether it be broadband access, climate change, and agriculture, amongst the many different avenues. So keep in touch with us, please. We're fully engaged. Brian and Brian are here to help assist you in any concerns and conversations that you want to engage in. And I'm just, we're excited, and we really hope to galvanize some excitement around this, because we think we have a really broad narrative that we're engaging in, and thank you for the question.
Great. Well, the conversation appears to be wrapping up, so I think we'll take a moment here just to wrap up on our end.
Hey Ryan, sorry,
yeah.
I don't want to interrupt you. So how many people do we have on right now, if you don't mind me?
Currently 26.
Is there any way to open this up for conversation on a broader? Can we unmute? I know I'm getting into the Wild West here, but I'd really like to hear from some people directly, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody. If you guys want to talk, go ahead and raise your hand, but we'll just let it be, as Corey said, the Wild West here.
Good. It's really nice to hear some other stuff other than just Ryan's voice, even though, Ryan, you're like a songbird and my own. But yeah, it's really good to engage. So yeah, go ahead. Is that Doreen? Yeah.
Yes, it is, Corey. Do you have campaign signs yet?
We don't have signs yet. We are going to be doing some mailers, so you'll see a presence through the mail. But yeah, no signs yet. We'll cross that bridge. I know there are some people that love them and some people that hate them.
All righty.
Generally speaking,
Thank you.
we probably won't get into signs until we get to the general.
Okay.
We have Brian Lloyd here. And for all of those of you who haven't had recent communication with the campaign, I want to introduce you to Brian Lloyd. He is our newly appointed finance director. He's been doing a fantastic
Big mistake.
He's been here helping us out and getting all kinds of house parties and different things set up for us. This is probably the one political campaign event that you won't find us asking for your money. So he's sort of just here to help us out and give you guys give us some feedback after we finish here. But you will see him around a lot. So he and I have been working back and forth on our strategy here. We're trying to play it relatively conservative for the primary, so that we have enough money to go ahead and beat John Salka in the general. So that's when we'll be getting into that.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. We have a broad question here, but is there any non-agriculture stuff you just want to touch on real quick, Corey? I know that's a whole big,
thank you. No, I appreciate it. Let's talk about broadband as we are talking on the Zoom tonight. Listen, if I'm going to start and I'm going to keep repeating until I'm, blue in the face.
Gotcha.
Was that Eric? Of course that was you. Was that Eric? No? Okay. All right. Listen, broadband needs to be a utility. Okay. We electrified this nation. It is something that is so important to our way of life that we cannot afford in this area to fall behind other people. In our education of our kids, their opportunity, and our businesses, it has to be a utility. And I will not sugarcoat that or come off of that. It needs to be a utility, and everybody needs to have access. And we live in a nation that can do it.
Yeah. I know there's a ton of different things that you want to touch on there. So let me take this opportunity to say that we will be setting more of these up in the future. We're trying to keep them focused for now. Obviously, everybody's getting tired of hearing about COVID-19, but it unfortunately ties into everything that we have to say. So there are other key issues like climate change and infrastructure, and more into the broadband issue that we are going to be hosting more in-depth conversations on in the future. So look out for those if you want to learn a little bit more about Corey's positions on some of those other.
Come back.
Well, Corey has left the building, so.
I had to just do that once.
Very nice.
Well,
I think you could do that again and again.
Nice. You want the rowboat this time? No, I don't know if my kids are on, but this is the dad that they get a lot. It's like I had to do that just once while Ryan was talking. I apologize.
I totally understand. Well, thank you all so much for attending. This has been great, and this has been a wonderful conversation. We're happy to get these questions. We really want difficult and challenging questions. We don't want to have to shy away from this. Corey knows his stuff, and we're here to prove it. So I hope that for any of you who are just learning a little bit about Corey now, you see why Brian and I are so committed and here trying to get this man elected, because we really need this voice in Albany. Yeah, I mean, I'm on the campaign for a reason, buddy. So we are here for any questions you have. Please feel free to reach out. I will post the campaign email in the chat one last time, as well as another link to the campaign website. We are very active on Facebook, less active on Twitter, but we do still post there. And we would love to continue to interact with you guys. So if there's ever anything you need from us, if there's something you want us to talk about, if there's a business, an organization you want us to promote, somebody you want us to talk to, please feel free to reach out. We're here to make your wish come true. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all very much, just to echo what Ryan says, and I'll get off. And please, if you have any more questions or comments or good stories to tell, we only have a few minutes left before we log off. Just really, thank you very much. Engage with us. We want to talk. We're really going to be open with the conversations that we have. We know that we're going to get in disagreements, but there's no growth and no learning if we're not talking and having those conversations. So that's what this campaign is about. And we really, really look forward to the engagement, but it takes two to tango. So please, please engage us.
All right, everybody. So I have posted the, yeah, sorry, Dorian, go ahead.
I just would like to say, Corey, I'm very interested about the education. I mean, Como's talking about cutting 20% state aid to all our schools. So I will probably be wondering how, it's going to turn out. So education is a big thing on my mind.
Dorian, it is going to be ugly.
It is.
There's no way around it.
Especially for small school districts and
Yep. We need to be focused on what's going to be the best, obviously, for the kids. As I talk to teachers, I mean, that begins with, as the governor is talking about what we're going to do with the end of the school year, I'm talking to teachers and they're saying, Corey, if we can just check in with them, I know we're not going to get a lot of work done, but they're students that they have that they just want to make sure they're okay and check in with. And it starts there, Doreen. It starts with that. And we're going to have some tough things and some tough pills we're going to have to swallow, but we need to stay
stay focused and optimistic. Yep. All right. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all again. If you need to reach out and you lose the contact there, it is corey480@gmail.com. But if you need to reach out and you lose the contact there, please reach out on the Facebook page. We respond as soon as we can. So once again, thank you all for coming. We hope to see you at more of these in the future. And have a nice rest of your night, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you, Corey.